Our guest tonight is Kate Lambert. Kate Lambert is the CEO and co-founder, along with Verley, of Daughterly Care. And Kate is going to be talking about...
I'm the boss. You're not the boss of me now.
Well, I better get off then. Over to you, Kate.
Wow. I didn't realise Robin was going to put me on the spot like that.
Neither did I.
I was off in La La Land. So you're not the boss of me now. I'd like to talk about the importance of us, you and I, continuing to hold on to our personal power, in particular in the twilight years of our life. The most important thing that us human beings need is we need love, and we need to feel that we belong. And we also really like to be self-determining. And ageing is a process that takes a lot of power away. It strips a lot of power away, personal power away from people. Now, one of the issues that older people feel very strongly about, in fact, survey after survey shows you that 97% of older Australians want to stay in their own home. And that's why the government introduced the government-funded home care packages, because you might not realise this, but most older people get their aged care not in a residential nursing home, which is where 97% don't want to go, but most get it in their own home. And it's a very good program, and the reason that I love it, apart from the fact that older people love it because their home is familiar to them and very comfortable to them, but the reason that I love that program, and I love older people staying at home, is that when you stay at home, you have more power and control. Because you actually can say, I don't like this person that came today and I don't want them to come back into my house. But you cannot say that in a nursing home. You can't say, I don't want this person to work here in the nursing house anymore. You don't have that. Within home care, you can decide how much, what you have cooked for you. You actually get to continue living your life the way that you want to do. Now, there are events that happen, however, as we age, that are these key events that really strip away a lot of power for us. And if you know what those key events are in advance, then you can remember and you can say, oh, I remember Kate told me I've got to hold on to my power. So let me just tell you what some of those key events are. You're diagnosed with mild cognitive decline. Now you start to lose your confidence, people notice that you get your nouns mixed up. There's an automatic assumption that it's going to go on to dementia, which it may not. But people start making decisions for you without including you. Of course, a diagnosis of dementia, that happens even more. And yet there are so many years in that dementia journey where people have got the ability to make so many decisions, and they get very frustrated when they can't. The death of a spouse is a time when a lot of power is taken away from us. So when you're a couple and it's the two of you making decisions together, your kids take notice of you. But unfortunately, one of the things we see is that when one of the couple dies, this person goes into grieving, and also people start to try and take care of that person and start to try and make decisions for them, and they're not necessarily good decisions or decisions that they're happy with, and they feel quite alone and unable to speak up for themselves. So death of a spouse is one where you really want to hold on to your power. The big one is falls. And what I want to tell you about tonight is three client examples from over the years, 24 years we've had Daughterly Care, of scenarios where people really had their power stripped away from them, and decisions made for them that were devastating, really quite heartbreaking. So the first example I can think of was a 99-year-old lady who lived around here, and she had been a successful headmistress. So she'd been in charge of teachers and run schools. She'd educated, lots of children, and it was her career, it was her passion. So she never married and she never had children, and she was 2 weeks away from her 100th birthday. And she was still continent. So she was still getting up in the middle of the night, sometimes to go to the toilet, and unfortunately, That's exactly what happened. She got up to go to the toilet and she fell. And she was 2 weeks away from being 100. And she couldn't get back up, and so she stayed on the floor for about 4 hours, and it was winter. She was on carpet, but when our carer got there, she was very cold, and an ambulance was called, and she went off to hospital. Now, this was pre-COVID, because now they wouldn't necessarily take you as quickly. They would try and keep you at home a bit more. So she went to hospital, and then what happens, because the problem with falls is that there's a cascading effect. And now we're stuck in the system, and the system's got its own rhythm and its own power. They check her out, they do lots of tests. She's got no breaks, no hairline fractures, pretty amazing. And they can't find a medical reason why she's fallen. Probably just 99, almost 100, and her blood pressure maybe wasn't quite right, got up too quickly, needed to sit on the bed for a little bit, but rushed to the toilet maybe. So they tell her family member that she can't go home, that she has to go to a nursing home. And the family member doesn't talk to her, the doctors don't talk to her, nobody asks her what she wants. This is a woman 2 weeks away from 100 who doesn't have any dementia. She's as bright as. And she goes and is put into a nursing home. Now, at first she thinks, I'm just here for a little while, a couple of days to get better, and then I'm going home. But pretty quickly she realises, no, she's been permanently placed into that nursing home. And for her, she can't understand that, and it's devastating. And she says to our carer who visits her, my family member doesn't love me. Because she doesn't feel listened to. She hasn't been asked what she's wanted. She's made it clear she doesn't like it there and she wants to go home. And she can't understand why she can't go home. She's got nothing broken and there's no great reason why she fell. And she wants to go back to the fabulous life that she was leading. So she does what many older people do, but the general public don't know. She commits suicide by not eating. In fact, she won't sit up. She refuses to sit up and she refuses to eat. And the Director of Nursing is so upset about this because she's seen what good condition she was in when she came in, that she personally tries to feed her, once every day. But she's not going to she doesn't open her mouth. A lot of people, older people, so we hear a lot on the news about, young men committing suicide. If we were to count suicide figures properly, most suicides happen amongst the older people who have made a decision. Now, she would not have taken her life. She did get to 100, but it wasn't a party that she'd been planning. She didn't take her life because she'd had enough of life. She hadn't had enough. She actually had a really good quality life and she enjoyed life. She took her life because she didn't feel cared about, didn't feel as though her one family member, who she'd given all the power and control to, was listening to her. And it's not uncommon for people to stop eating once they go into a nursing home. So that's my first scenario, which was a very sad one. So now I'm going to contrast it with another scenario caused by a fall. So this is a businessman who has a fall, ends up in hospital, also a client of ours, and he rings us up and says, I'd like you normally come and see me 3 times a week, but I'd like you to come and see me every day I'm in the hospital. I want my washing done, fresh pyjamas every day, I want fruit, the food here is terrible, I want this, I want that. The problem is, he's got 2 children, and one of his adult children is the one that found us, and they signed the agreement with us, and they pay the bill. And so we're in this really awkward situation, which a lot of service providers find themselves in, as to who is actually our client. Is it the adult child that engaged us and who pays us? And if we do something against their wishes, they may not pay us, and they may well say that we're crossed professional boundaries and we didn't follow instructions properly and put a complaint in. Or is it the person who the man who we've been looking after. So we didn't want to upset the relationship between that adult child and our client, and so we told him a little white lie. We told him that we can't visit people in hospital. We don't visit people in hospital. This was pre-COVID. And he was a businessman, so he just thought that was ridiculous. And he let us know very clearly how much we had disappointed him, what a ridiculous policy that was. And he didn't care what our policy was. He wanted us to come, and he even had thought about it. He said, normally you come 3 times a week. I want you to come to the hospital, the same lady at the same time. I know she's already scheduled in for me. But we couldn't do it because the boss, the adult child, had said that we weren't allowed to. And he kept ringing multiple times a day, and I happened to walk past and hear about this, and I thought about it, and I stood in that man's shoes and I said, we've made the wrong decision here. And so Nurse Furley went out to see him in the hospital and have this really difficult conversation where she told him that we'd told him a little white lie, and it was a mistake. That we wanted to come and look after him in the hospital, if that's what he wanted, but the person who engaged us and signed the agreement and pays the bill, your adult child, has told us we're not allowed to. And so that's when he realised he wasn't the boss at all. So he said to us, he said to Verley, and this was a number of years ago, so it was a big deal. He said, I want you to know I've given $500,000, $500,000 to each of my 2 children, and they've bought homes with that. And all I want now is to be looked after when I need to be looked after. But unlike that first client who wasn't prepared to step ahead and make a difference, he said, I'm going to send you a cheque because I'm going to be the boss. And I'm going to send you a cheque and you're going to bank it. And whenever my adult children tell you that you can't do something that I want, you're going to take the money out of the cheque that I send you. And Verley said to him, no, that's not the way it works. We don't take people's money, in advance. We do the work and then we invoice you and send it to you once a fortnight. And he said, no, well, that clearly doesn't work properly because the boss is actually my adult child. So no, I am sending you this cheque, which is a really awkward thing for us. And so we actually held on to this cheque, and every week we'd say, should we bank it? No, we're not going to bank it, no. After a month, Verley went back out and she saw him in his home and she said, look, I've come to give you your cheque back. And he said, I know you haven't banked it because I've been checking the bank. This is how switched on he was, right? And he said, no, I'll be offended. He said, you're a businesswoman. I trust you. I don't want to have any problems with my children. I just want to get cared for when I need care. And so that was his way. He did not tell his children what he had done because he didn't want to have any altercation with them, especially the one who had said no multiple times. He died a week after we banked the cheque, which was really awkward when it came to ringing his children and telling them, we've got $20,000 of your dad's money. One of his children said, when we told that child the story, that child said, I can understand exactly why Dad did what he did, and I thank you for looking after him. And the other child, who'd given us the instructions, just said, thank you. And of course, all the money went back to the families. But that was his way, what he felt that he needed to do to stay in charge. Of course, a better way to stay the boss would have been for him to have signed the agreement in the first place and for us to have made it clear that who do we take direction from? Well, we take it from you because you're of sound mind and you can tell me exactly what you want. And actually it's your money that's paying for the service. So, a tip out of that is make sure that you are the boss that signs the agreement. And the third example I want to tell you about is really quite extreme. Again, it's a mother because women live longer, statistically speaking, than men. And the women, generally speaking, look after what we have seen in 24 years is that they look after their husbands the last 10 years of their life. And then it's a time when they need a bit of help. And, you know, the adult children have been on a care journey through dad and now, and they're not always, they're busy. And so they're not always there for mum. And mums live longer. And mums are compliant. They're quite compliant. So when they have a fall, as this lady did in the street, she was legally blind and she had a fall in the street, probably when her adult child said to her, "Mum, you're not safe to stay at home anymore. You need to go to the nursing home." Mums probably just, well, we see it with our business, they just have a few tears and off they go. But I'll tell you what the men do, the husbands. "I'm not going to a nursing home." And I tell you what, those adult kids, no way in hell they're going to put their father in a nursing home. And so, trust me, I have got that damn pat for me, not going to a nursing home for my sons, right? And I've taught my mother, virtually every time you arrive at my mother's house, she says, "I'm not going to a nursing home." I go, "Good, Mum, that's good." You don't have to say that to me though, say that to my brother. So this lady, legally blind, has a fall, hospital. What happens? The hospital system, you get into all of that and they say, "You've got to go to a nursing home." And her only child puts her in a nursing home and she's desperately unhappy, desperately. And she's really fortunate though because she's got a good friend and she rings this friend, tells her friend how unhappy she is, and they make a plan. And the plan is that her friend is going to kidnap her from the nursing home. So we get a phone call at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. My on-call manager gets it and says, and she rings us afterwards, she says, "I just had this strangest call. I think it's real, but, you know, okay, let me tell you, because I need to know what to do, because we've never had this happen before and I don't know exactly what the what the answer is. This lady, her best friend, is taking her for coffee tomorrow and on a walk out of the nursing home and not taking her back. She's kidnapping her. Then they're going to the bank and they're going to take the adult child's signature away so that they can't get any more money. And then they're going home and they want us to be there at 1 o'clock to do an assessment to see whether or not we could care for them. But wait, I also had a phone call from a social worker, a third party, who confirms that this woman does not have dementia. She is of sound mind and capable of making her own decisions and very much wants to go home. Did you ask the social worker, can she walk? Yes, she can transfer out of the bed, she can mobilise. She's walking tomorrow when they kidnap her. Right, okay. Well, it sounds to me like we're duty bound to meet this lady at 1 o'clock. And so Nurse Verley goes and meets her at 1 o'clock, and 10 minutes after Verley's arrived, the police knock on the door. And Verley's thinking to herself, "Goodness me, what have I done? What have we done here?" And the lady says, yes, you're for me. I want you to take an AVO out against my only child. And the policeman says, "What has your only child done?" "Put me in a nursing home against my will, left me there, wouldn't get me out." And I absolutely know that as soon as we tell her, where I am, she's going to physically come and take me back to the nursing home. And at that point, Verley realises, oh, hang on a sec, we need to, do you want to ring your adult child and let her know that you're here at home, safe, with your best friend? No, you can do that job, Nurse Verley. So Nurse Verley bravely rings this adult child who screams down the phone, "Take my mother back to the nursing home!" And, Nurse Verley tries to explain to her, well, she's of a sound mind, she's capable of making this decision, her friend and her made this decision, I just met them here, I've had nothing to do with it. Take her back to the nursing home! And Verley's not getting anywhere, so Verley says, well, actually there's a man here, a policeman. I think I'll just put him on to you. And by this stage, we've actually got not one cop car out the front, but 3. Because in this very well-to-do suburb, they've never had a powerful older woman stand up to us, to a family like this and call the police. And they don't actually know what to do about it. So the highest, the captain, I think they call him, or the superintendent of the actual police station is there to supervise this scenario to make sure that, none of us stuff it up, because none of us have been through this before. Anyway, the policeman nicely explains to the adult child that, you know, your mum's of sound mind, your mum's even organised care, and the screaming at him, take her back to the nursing home. And the policeman explains, legally I can't do that. Now most people don't know that. Legally you cannot force, even a family member, even the police can't force you to go to a nursing home. It actually has to go to a panel of experts, a guardianship tribunal, who look at the whole scenario and decide whether or not the nursing home is the best place for you and the only place for you. And this adult child is starting to get a bit desperate now because even the police aren't obliging, and says, Mum can't afford home care. But her mum heard that. What? I own 6 units and I've got a share portfolio worth X million dollars. And I've already been to the bank, and she stands up and there's a lumpy couch. Because, I kid you not, she's got wads of bloody cash to pay for her in-home care. You know, the police are there, thank goodness, and Verley says, oh, that's not the way we work. And she says, well, look, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to count that out with witnesses, and you're going to have to get that back to the bank, like today, because we can't have any of this going missing. But meanwhile, the police have said to the adult child, I really strongly recommend that you do not come over here for at least 2 days. You need to calm down and you need to think this through. And when you think it through, you need to remember that your mother has got the capacity to make this decision, and she does not want to be in the nursing home, she wants to be at home, and she has put care in place. And there is no one, apart from a tribunal, that can make her go to the nursing home. And so we looked after her for a couple of years, and she was a very self-determining woman. And on her 3rd bout of pneumonia, she said, I don't want to have antibiotics this time. I want to go. And she didn't want to die at home. She said, I want you to take me up to the local private hospital and I want to die up there. And I asked the care manager, can you please ring the daughter and let her know that her mum is dying. Let her know exactly the situation. And the daughter and the granddaughters came up to the hospital and looked after her for the last couple of days of her life. And they apologised to each other and forgave each other. And we went to the funeral, and it was a beautiful funeral where the daughter and the grandchildren spoke about what a wonderful mother she had been, loving, kind, generous. We didn't know what was going to happen at that funeral, so it was a beautiful surprise for us to hear what a wonderful mother she had been. But she was prepared to stand up for herself, even if it meant that her adult child wasn't going to talk to her for a couple of years. But they did make a resolution, and so that was, really nice. They did try to have a few resolutions, but that was nice that happened in the end. So one of the things I do know for absolutely certain is that one of the ways that you keep your power as an older person is you have to have 3 tools. You have to have an enduring guardian who makes your care and accommodation decisions when you can't. That's the key thing. It's a very abused document, and people start making decisions for you when you can. No, it is only operational when you can't. And the enduring power of attorney is the person who's legally able to make financial decisions for you when you can't. And this one, the Advanced Care Directive, is where you write what you want to happen to you in your final years, in your final months, how you want to be cared for, what's acceptable for you, what's not acceptable for you. Such as that lady saying, 3rd bout of pneumonia, no, not doing that again, no more antibiotics, time for me to go. And taking control, keeping control of her life. So this is a very important document, and most people don't have those 3 things. And most people also don't know that an enduring guardian, if you've made a decision to have someone as your enduring guardian 5 years ago, but now you've changed your mind because you've seen a bit more of the colour of that person and the way they act, you can change it. So that first example that I gave you where the family member had the enduring guardian, that should not have been operational. That family member legally could not put that lady in the nursing home. And legally, that lady could have simply said, I'm going home. She didn't have to ask. She didn't have to negotiate. She could have just gone home. But she didn't know that. And second of all, and this is the real thing, she didn't want to upset that family member. It was more important to her to not upset that family member than it was to stand up for herself. But here's the thing, we can stand up for ourselves and still keep our power and still live a good life in our later years and live the way we want to live and not upset people. And part of the way we do that is to talk about things in advance. Talk about what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you. And that's what that is all about. And when you do that, you stay in control and your life is far more enjoyable when you're in control of it and making the decisions that are happy and right for you. And for most people, home is where they're happiest. So thank you.